Did you know that some of the most powerful features in Angular aren't components but directives? If you have ever duplicated DOM logic, repeated event handling, or added the reminder we'll refactor this later, then this video is for you. In this video, we'll master custom attribute directives, how to build them, how to avoid common traps, and how to use them in real applications. So, let's see how this works. As we already know, an attribute directive attaches behavior to an existing DOM element without creating new markup. We already seen built-in directives with ng class and ng style in our last lecture. Why do we need custom directives? Custom attribute directives lets you create reusable DOM behavior cleanly and declaratively. Let's say you want to add an autofocus behavior on an input in your application or highlight a text whenever it is hovered. Then you don't need to create a component or write complex logic to achieve this. A custom directive is the saver for such scenarios. Let's start creating such a custom directive. So we are in our poster application that we have been working on until now. We have only two components, header and postlets. So that is right here. So when we go to the app folder, we have two components, header and postlets. So let's see how this is looking right now. So this is our application. Okay, that is that we have created up till now in our this tutorial series, and we have two posts right now, post title 1 and post title 2. Okay, so what we want to do is that we want to have a search box on the top of this post list, and we will create a directive that will autofocus on that input whenever we visit this post list component. All right, so remember that our target is reusability, so that it can be used on any input element, or rather I would say any focusable element, not just here. Okay, so we'll start by creating a directive. We'll go to the terminal. Okay, so we'll type the command ng, then generate, and then the what we want to generate a directive, so we'll type d. Okay, d for directive, and then here the directive name, right? So I want to create a directive autofocus that should autofocus on an element. Okay, so we will name it auto and then focus. All right, so this is the directive that we want to create, so I'll hit enter. Okay, so remember, you can always create a directive using the copilot that we have in our that we have configured in our previous lectures. Okay, I'll add the exact prompt that you can enter, and it will create the directive effortlessly. It will also create the input, apply the directive to the input, and even import it in your component, right? And but here our focus is to learn how this works under the hood. So once the directive is created, all right, we will add an input in our post list component on the top of this post list. Okay, let's see, let's create an input or element over here. So I will add an input element over here, input colon text. So this will create an input with type text. Okay, so the name would be search and the id would be also search also, and I want to add a placeholder but don't need that class, so I'll accept the placeholder from the copilot but remove the class from here. Okay, so once my input is created, I'll add a event handling. Okay, so whenever there is a change into this input element, whenever something is typed into this element, I want to catch that so that I can filter this post list. All right, so what I'll do, I will simply add one input event over here. Okay, and handle that using a function. Okay, the method into my component, which is filter posts. All right, and I'll pass the event. Okay, this event is simply the event that is coming from the DOM element, the input element. All right, so I'll create that the method into this component. Okay, so once our method is created over here, I'll just remove it from here and I'll add it over here. Okay, to filter the post. So to see the filtered post, I want to add a variable, another variable where I'll store this filtered post. Okay, So you see Copilot has suggested me that I should use this filtered post variable, so I'll accept that. And once there is a change input inside this input element, okay, so I'll filter the post. So I'm getting the input const input event dot target dot value dot true lowercase, so that's what I want. Okay, so I'll simply accept that. Okay, now Copilot is also suggesting me that I should handle this filtered post using this function filter from the post list. Okay, so I'll accept that as well because that's what I want to do. Okay, so this is interesting. So I'll only for now I'll only filter based on the title. Okay, so I'll remove the content filter along with the type as well. Okay, so I'll just add the filter based on the title. Okay, so once the posts are filtered, okay, I'll simply head over into my post list.html and remove the post list variable from here with the filtered post. All right, so let's see if this is working or not. I'll go into my post list component and type here too. So you see the posts are being filtered right now. Okay, so our goal is to add autofocus on this search post input. So what we'll do now, we'll move to our autofocus directive. Okay, there is nothing right now. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll create an input because this autofocus directive should be configurable. If I want to add autofocus or not, then this should be configurable. So I'll add an input over here. Okay, so remember, if you want to add an input which is the default input, so the default input should only start with the selector of this directive. Okay, so this is our selector, and this will also act as an input into this directive. Okay, so I'll simply add input from here. Okay, so input, and then that should be a boolean value. Okay, now whenever there is this text inside our DOM, right, so to autofocus on that element, what we'll do, add will implement after view init. Okay, so this lifecycle hook is required because the DOM element is not there, the focus will not appear. Okay, the focus will not happen unless the DOM element is appearing on the browser. Okay, so unless there is a DOM element, the focus won't work. Okay, so this is our after view unit. So what we'll do inside after view unit, ng after view unit. Okay, so this is what we want to do. And now to focus an element, we want to know, or we want to get that element. Okay, whatever element that we want to focus on. Okay, so the directive will have access to that particular element using the element ref. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll add a private variable over here, right? So the element ref, this element ref is the element which has been accessible by this directive, right? The directive has this access to this element. Okay, so we'll add the element ref. Okay, and we'll add the inject. Okay, and the element should be coming from the element ref, right? And that should be HTML element. Okay, not the HTML UI element or the HTML element. Okay, we'll add the HTML element. Okay, now whenever this autofocus is true, I want to have that element to be focused. Okay, so this is what Copilot is suggesting me, that I should accept that, and because this is what I want to do. Okay, so I'll accept that code from here. Okay, and remove the extra bracket from here. Okay, so once our ng after view unit is done, once we have added the conditions, okay, what we have to do now is that we have to go inside our post list.html component. Okay, the template, and here we have to import first inside the post list.tls. Okay, So we'll import that directive from inside our imports array. So autofocus is our directive. Okay, so that class is being exported from that autofocus directive from here. So that same class would be there inside our imports array. So this is our imports array. Okay, so once we have imported, we'll go inside our postlist.html. Okay, so we'll simply add the app autofocus. Okay, so let's keep by default as true. Okay, so we'll not pass anything from here. Okay, so let's see if this is working or not. Okay, we'll only add app autofocus from here. Okay, so that's it. But since we have added a boolean input from there, so we'll have to pass a boolean value from here. Okay, so we'll pass the boolean value using the property binding. Okay, so we have passed the true from here. Okay, so that comes to this autofocus input, and once this is true, this should autofocus on that input element. Okay, so let's see if this is working or not. You see, this element is auto focused whenever we refresh or whenever we come to this post list component. Okay, and we can directly filter on that. Okay, so this is how the custom directive is being created. Okay, you can also create another input into this directive where you want to have different configurations on your directive, so that can be passed from this as you already passed into the component inputs. You can directly pass the directive inputs from here as well. Okay, there is a simple gotcha here. If you try to focus the element on the constructor or the on init, it will silently fail. It will not give any error, but it will silently fail because the DOM isn't accessible before after view init. Sometimes it will work because in our case it will work because it is a simple application with just an input and a list, right? For example, if I change the after view unit with on init, okay, and change the method with ng on init, then this should also work. Okay, so you see this is also working, right? So if I refresh the page, and this is also working because this our application is a simple application with just an input and a list, right? But if your application is complex, you should try to add the focus logic inside after view init. Also, there are edge cases like avoid auto focusing multiple elements, disable autofocus for screen readers when needed. It should be used conditionally, not globally. All right. Now, why these features belong this directive, right? Why not a component or a simple complex logic or component logic, right? Because autofocus is just a pure DOM behavior. Putting this logic inside a component pollutes the business logic and leads to duplication. And a directive keeps it reusable, declarative, and testable. Okay. Remember, you can also have autofocus on this input element using the HTML autofocus attribute without creating the directive. But that will not work when there is conditional rendering of the element or when it's a dialog or model and the element is inside the model. Bear in mind that while using the HTML autofocus attribute directive. Now, there is another way of changing the DOM behavior without the element ref. So we have used element ref inside our autofocus directive. So there is another way of changing the DOM behavior, right? We can use the host attribute of this directive. So let's create another directive which will change the background color of the post container whenever it is hovered. For example, so this is our post container. So I want to change the background color of this post container, okay, whenever that is hovered. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll go ahead and create the directive using the same command ng generate directive and the let's call it highlight directive. All right, so I'll do the I'll name it as highlight directive. So this will create a directive inside the main folder, but let's keep the directives inside a folder. Let's say this will be directives folder. Okay, so we'll move these autofocus and the highlight directives inside this directive folder. Okay, so once that is moved into this folder, remember to update the imports array. Okay, imports array of this post list component, the path should be updated. Okay, so we are in the directives folder now. Okay, so we'll go to the highlight directive now. Here what we'll do is we'll just add a mouse enter and mouse over events, right? And based on that we'll change our background color. All right. So first of all we need to have a default color. Okay, so that default color will be passed from the element or the component where this directive is being used. All right, so let's call that input as default color. Okay, so this is our the input. Okay, so we'll just add a signal input over here. Okay, so this will be string type but not yellow. Our default color is this one. Okay, so this is our default color. Okay, that is there inside our post container. So whenever the mouse is moved away from that container, we want to have the color, background color of this of that container to be this color. Okay, so this is our default color, and let's say I want to have a bg color as a variable. Okay, so this is our, so we'll assign it to the default color. Okay, so this is our background color. Now how can we know that when an element, our mouse is hovered over to that element or the mouse is moved away from that element, right? So for that we have this host property of this directive. So within that we can use that you see the Copilot has already suggested we can directly use this style.background color with the bg color variable that we have inside our highlight directive class. Okay, so we'll use that. We'll add the events. Okay, so this is the mouse enter event. So what we'll do, we'll use mouse enter. Okay, and this in this way we'll just call our function. Okay, on mouse enter, right? So this is our mouse enter function, and whenever there is whenever the mouse is moved away from that element, we can just use the mouse leave function that is being suggested by Copilot. So I'll accept that. Okay, so we'll use these methods inside our directive. Okay, now whenever the mouse is entered, I want to change the background color. Okay, so I'll change the background color not with the yellow but with some lighter version of the the default color, right? So this will be, so this is our the default color that I want to add. Right now whenever the mouse is moved away, I want to change back the default color, the background color, to the default color. Okay, so I'll accept that whatever is Copilot is suggesting me. So okay, so I'll add as that as well. Okay, so this is our directive, the highlight directive. Okay, now how can we use this directive inside our post list HTML template? So what we'll have to do, we first have to import that highlight directive inside our imports array. So let's add that highlight directive. Okay, so this is our highlight directive. Okay, and now I'll add the highlight attribute over here, app highlight. So this is our directive. Now remember we have the default color inside our highlight directive. Okay, so the default color is the input that we can pass from there. So we'll add the default color input from here, default color. Okay, and that default color is the color that you want to save. For example, if you don't want the default color of this one to be this, right, so this color, you can just always change that default color, right? But let's say I don't want the default color to be this one. Okay, let's say I'll add the default color whatever is there as a default color, right? Because that is the color of my post container, right? Now you see whenever there is a hover, you see the color, the background color of this container, post container is being changed, right? So that's how you can use a directive, and you can use without the element ref, right? Now one thing I just noticed that this should be a public. Okay, so I have added that private static over here, so this should be a dynamic variable. Okay, so post object dot type, that's it. It should be post object dot type, right? So this will just show the private or public post, and whenever our mouse is hovered, or whenever our mouse is moved away from that container, the background color changes. All right, so attribute directive is easy to create and useful. Remember the edge cases and gotchas that we discussed. If you apply multiple directives on the same element, then the execution order is not guaranteed. So always design directives to be independent, avoid shared mutable state, never assume another directive has already run. Now let's look at the best practices. Keep directives focused and small. Avoid direct DOM access. Some people use element ref directly for accessing the DOM into the directive. Instead, you can use render to or host binding for that. Handle dynamic input changes. Clean up global listeners, and test the DOM behavior before moving into the production. Attribute directives are the cleanest way to reuse DOM behavior in Angular. If you found this video helpful, like and subscribe to the channel. In our next video, we'll look at the component input and output using signals.